I stepped off the plane, my skin still warm from the sun, my mind buzzing with the remnants of vacation bliss. The week away had been perfect, or so I thought. I imagined returning to my sanctuary, the quiet familiarity of my home, the little comforts I had worked so hard for. But as soon as I opened the front door, something felt off. The place was eerily empty, too empty. My heart sank, a cold knot forming in my stomach before I even saw her. Mom was standing in the living room, casual as ever, sipping her coffee like nothing had changed. "I sold your house," she said, smiling as if she'd just announced the weather. My brain stalled. I repeated the words in my head, hoping the meaning would shift, that maybe I had misunderstood. You what?" My voice cracked. She shrugged as if shrugging off a minor inconvenience. "I had to help your sister with her debts. You know, $214,000 isn't easy to cover." The numbers hit me like a punch. My house, my life, my security, gone. I felt humiliation rise, a deep, burning shame that they could do this to me without even asking. Anger churned with disbelief. How could the people who were supposed to protect me decide I was expendable? Everything I had built, every quiet sacrifice, every penny saved, it had vanished while I trusted them. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw myself against the walls, but I couldn't. I just stood there, frozen, as Mom continued speaking, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. My stomach twisted, my mind raced, and I realized something terrifying. Nothing would ever feel safe in that house again, not while they could treat it as if it were theirs to give away. I took a shaky breath, the anger and shame coiling tightly, and knew this was only the beginning. As the shock of losing my house settled like a weight in my chest, my mind refused to stay in the present. It pulled me backward, dragging me through a series of memories I had tried, foolishly, to forget. I remembered birthdays where my sister's desires always came first, her elaborate parties, expensive gifts, trips I could only dream of. Every achievement I brought home was met with a perfunctory nod, while her smallest accomplishments were celebrated as if she had single-handedly saved the family. I recalled the times I had been disciplined for minor mistakes, grounded for missing curfews, scolded for overspending on necessities, while she ran wild, borrowing without consequence, lying without fear. The contrast cut deep. I had spent years building my life carefully, saving every penny, working overtime, quietly making sacrifices no one acknowledged. She spent freely, indulged constantly, and yet she was always praised for her charm, her cleverness, her heart. My mom's approval seemed to bend and sway with her whim, never mine. Even now, as I faced the ruin of my home, I could see the pattern, the favoritism stitched into every family decision, every interaction. It wasn't just the money, it was the message. My worth had always been less, my needs always secondary, my efforts invisible. The house wasn't just a building. It was proof of a life I had built responsibly, taken for granted, and ultimately stolen because of her entitlement. Anger bubbled alongside a bitter recognition that this had been happening my whole life, each moment of unfair treatment laying the groundwork for the humiliation I now felt. And in that bitter clarity, I understood something crucial. The same family who had allowed her to thrive at my expense had underestimated what I was capable of when pushed too far. I couldn't hold it in any longer. My hands shook, my voice trembling but sharp, as the words finally poured out. "How could you sell my house without asking me? Do you even realize what that means?" Mom tilted her head slightly, a small, almost dismissive smile playing on her lips, as if I were overreacting to a minor inconvenience. "It's family," she said calmly. "You should understand. I was helping your sister. She needed it." My chest tightened. Family. That word felt like a blade twisting in my gut. Helping her meant destroying me. I wanted to shout, to make her feel the same humiliation that had been crawling under my skin since I stepped through that empty door. Instead, I felt my throat close, a mixture of rage and disbelief choking me. "This isn't helping," I said, trying to steady myself. "This is erasing me." She waved her hand as if brushing off my existence, repeating the mantra of loyalty. "Family sticks together. You'll understand one day." My stomach sank at the casual cruelty, the way she reframed theft as care. betrayal as devotion. I walked through the empty rooms, imagining every memory now tainted, every corner of my life she had invaded. Anger and resentment twisted together, sharp and relentless. How many years had I swallowed her favoritism, her excuses, her selective love? How many sacrifices had I made that went unnoticed, while my sister's every whim was celebrated? My mind replayed moments of injustice, and the resentment hardened into a quiet, dangerous clarity. I could no longer rely on them, and perhaps I never had. This wasn't just about a house. It was about every time I had been dismissed, every time my worth had been measured against hers, and found lacking. And in that suffocating mix of grief and fury, I realized that I couldn't just accept her definition of loyalty. I needed my own reckoning, and the storm inside me began to gather, silent but inevitable, ready to break in ways they would never see coming. The initial shock of losing my house quickly gave way to the cold, practical realities I couldn't ignore. I opened my bank statements and spreadsheets, my hands trembling as I tallied what had been taken from me. My savings, carefully built over years of long nights and small sacrifices, had vanished into the black hole of my sister's debts. The numbers were cruel, unforgiving, a harsh reminder that my hard work had been siphoned off without consent or acknowledgement. Taxes loomed as another layer of complication. Capital gains, penalties, transfer fees, all of it now my burden to untangle, despite the fact that the sale had been conducted by Mom, without my signature. I could feel my chest tightening with every calculation, every line item a fresh stab of injustice. Then there was the relocation challenge. Where could I live? My plans, my stability, the routines I had built around this home, all shattered. The thought of starting over while watching them continue their lives as if nothing had happened made my blood boil. And yet, beneath the anger, there was vulnerability too. A deep, gnawing fear that maybe this betrayal wasn't just financial. Maybe it was a statement of power, a demonstration of just how little I mattered. The tension tightened like a vice as I sat among bills and broken plans, the weight of disbelief and rage pressing down. Every number, every tax form, every logistical nightmare reminded me that my family's sense of loyalty came at the cost of my life's stability. I realized that what had begun as humiliation was now compounded with real, tangible losses, and for the first time, the situation felt completely overwhelming. I needed a plan, but the enormity of it made every step forward feel impossible. I couldn't face this alone, not yet. That evening, I called my closest friends, the ones who had always seen me clearly, even when my family didn't. I poured everything out, the house, the debt, the betrayal, and for the first time, I let myself feel the anger without apology. "I can't believe she did this," my friend whispered, her voice heavy with disbelief. That's insane. You have every right to be furious." Another friend chimed in. "We need to think strategically. This isn't just about anger. It's about reclaiming what's yours." I nodded, a spark lighting inside me. Then I made an appointment with a financial advisor, someone impartial who could map the numbers and uncover any leverage points. Sitting across from her, I laid out every account, every expense, every piece of documentation. She frowned, flipping through statements. "This is significant," she said slowly. "Legally, you might have grounds, and there are ways to recoup losses, but it will take careful planning." As we spoke, a shift occurred inside me. The hopelessness began to crack, replaced by clarity and purpose. I realized I didn't need to fight blindly. I could fight smart. By the end of the meeting, I had a rough plan, a series of steps to protect myself, to regain control, and to make them understand that I wouldn't be erased so easily. For the first time since stepping through that empty door, I felt a flicker of empowerment, a sense that the scales might someday tip in my favor. After the meetings and the heated phone calls, something inside me shifted. I stopped yelling and started listening, to receipts, to whispers, to patterns that only numbers and small details could reveal. Instead of confronting them with accusations, I began a quieter war, gathering proof, mapping timelines, and building a file that would make it impossible for them to gaslight me away. I printed bank statements until my printer whirred like a tiny machine of truth. I pulled old emails, messages, and notes from shoeboxes I had never bothered to organize before. Every paper felt heavy with possibility. I watched their patterns from afar, I noted how my sister's payment transfers always came through after extravagant purchases, the timestamps telling their own quiet story. I cross-referenced dates, vacations, luxury purchases, and the days my sister conveniently forgot to repay a loan. I traced wires, examined mortgage documents, and discovered a string of informal loans my mother had taken on in my name under vague pretenses years ago. Promises that had been framed as family help, but were, in practice, invisible debts that now added up to my ruin. I took screenshots of social posts where my sister flashed new designer bags and exotic trips, then matched them to banking alerts. I collected voicemails where she casually asked for money, framing it as an emergency while I juggled rent and bills. I photocopied text threads where my mom reassured her that I'll take care of it, and then later signed off on documents that benefited my sister at my expense. I put everything in labeled folders: loans, transfers, promises, receipts. The act of organizing felt almost ceremonial. Each tab, each note, a tiny reclamation of order from the chaos they had caused. I also began quietly asking questions, calling old neighbors, a distant aunt, anyone who might remember loans or gifts that didn't add up. People were awkward at first, embarrassed to admit they'd seen favors and not spoken up. But a few offered small confirmations. Memories of my sister moving into rooms with new furniture paid for by family help. Mentions of my mother's willingness to step in financially without consulting me. Those confirmations felt like allies appearing in a long battle. They were small, but they added texture and credibility to the story the numbers were starting to tell. As days turned into weeks, I used the information strategically. I learned the exact date my mother finalized the sale, the notary who signed the papers, and the bank accounts where the funds had been routed. I found a few misfiled documents that suggested my mother had signed on my behalf years ago for a loan consolidation, a signature I had never authorized. Each discovery was a small victory, a turning point that fed the quiet confidence building inside me. I didn't confront them yet. Instead, I began drafting letters, outlining legal avenues, and speaking in hypotheticals with the financial advisor so my plans would be watertight. Every detail I uncovered became a leverage point. Proof for a lawyer, pressure for a mediator, or ammunition in a public reveal if it ever came to that. I learned that strategy beats spectacle. Timing and documentation could turn their casual cruelty into an undeniable case. The act of collecting felt almost like reclaiming breaths I'd been denied. Where before I had been erased by a single decision made over my head, I was turning erasure into evidence. Each folder I labeled felt like a small reclaiming of my life. I found that patience could be a weapon, quietly stacking facts until they formed a wall too high to ignore. The more I learned, the less I feared their denials. I slept poorly, but slept with purpose. My anger had been organized into evidence, and I felt the dangerous calm of someone preparing to reclaim what was theirs. As I sifted through documents and receipts, my mind drifted back to earlier years, a series of small betrayals that suddenly connected into a painful mosaic. I remembered the summer I'd taken on extra shifts to save for my college tuition. While my sister's vacation fund seemed to grow magically, courtesy of family help, I recalled lending her money for an overdue car payment, only for her to blow it on designer clothes, with Mom smiling indulgently as if she had done something noble. Every instance of generosity or responsibility on my part had been quietly ignored, while my sister's recklessness was celebrated. Birthdays were another pattern. Lavish gifts for her, minimal acknowledgement for me. My achievements, straight A's, awards, promotions, were met with a shrug or a perfunctory good job, while her smallest triumphs were highlighted at family gatherings, praised repeatedly. Even casual conversations with Mom revealed the same bias. "You need to learn discipline," she'd say to me. And, "Your sister is special. She'll figure it out," to her. As these memories piled up, a picture formed, stark and undeniable. This was not a one-time misjudgment. It was a consistent, intentional pattern, a lifelong tilt of affection and resources in my sister's favor. Empathy for my younger self mingled with anger at how systemically I had been undermined. Each flashback deepened my understanding of why my house had been so easily taken. It wasn't just about money. It was the culmination of years of neglect, favoritism, and subtle betrayal that had trained me to expect nothing. And now, they had pushed too far. The outrage that simmered inside me was no longer reactionary. It was righteous. I could see clearly the patterns they had tried to normalize, and in that clarity, I found the first sparks of a plan, the quiet determination that this time I would not be invisible. I realized that anger alone wouldn't fix anything. I needed action. I started by securing a temporary place to live, a modest apartment where I could breathe without the constant reminder of what had been taken from me. Each box I unpacked, each piece of furniture I carefully arranged, felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of autonomy in the shadow of my family's betrayal. Then I met with a lawyer who specialized in property disputes and family law. I laid out every detail: the sale of the house, the debts, my mother's unilateral decisions. As we spoke, I could feel the tide shifting. Legal jargon and procedural options became tools, almost weapons in my hands. I began constructing a detailed timeline of financial misdeeds: loans taken without consent, transfers disguised as gifts, and favoritism that had systematically undermined me. Each entry strengthened my position, turning vague anger into actionable evidence. While Mom and my sister continued their lives as if nothing had happened, I felt a surge of quiet power. I realized I wasn't helpless. I had foresight, resources, and strategy on my side. For the first time in weeks, I slept with a sense of purpose, knowing I had begun to turn the tables. What had been a narrative of loss was slowly transforming into one of empowerment. And with every careful step, I felt my confidence grow, a quiet but undeniable assertion that I would no longer be treated as expendable. When I received the invitation to a family dinner, my stomach twisted. Mom and my sister had framed it as a chance to make amends, to show that everything was forgiven and forgotten. Part of me wanted to scream, to cancel, to refuse the pretense entirely. But another part, the part that had been quietly gathering evidence and planning, knew this was the perfect stage. I arrived dressed simply, unassuming, masking the storm that had been building inside me. Every smile I forced felt like a small act of deception. They greeted me warmly, unaware of the meticulous attention I had paid to every detail of their financial misdeeds. Conversation flowed casually at first, Mom asking about work, my sister recounting vacations. But my mind was elsewhere, ticking like a clock, counting down to the moment I would begin to peel back the veneer of their innocence. Each laugh, each compliment, each subtle boast from my sister only stoked the tension within me, sharpening my focus. I reminded myself to stay calm, to let them underestimate me, to let the arrogance of their casual cruelty work against them. My internal monologue rehearsed the points I would reveal: the unauthorized loans, the hidden transactions, the years of favoritism and manipulation. I sipped my water slowly, pretending to listen while mentally mapping the perfect sequence of revelations. The room seemed smaller, every eye a potential witness, every comment a potential spark. I could almost feel the dramatic weight of the moment settling into place, the suspense coiling like a spring ready to release. And beneath it all, a cold, determined clarity. When the time came, the truth would hit them harder than anything I had felt on that vacation day when I first stepped through my empty front door. I waited for the perfect moment, letting small talk fade, letting their casual arrogance settle over the table like a thin veil. Then I leaned forward, my voice calm but steady, and said, "There's something you need to see." I pulled out a folder I had carried discreetly, the culmination of weeks of meticulous gathering: bank statements, receipts, loan agreements, screenshots, and timelines. The room went quiet. My sister's laughter faltered, and even Mom's smile wavered, sensing the shift. I began, one piece at a time, showing how her $218,000 debt had been covered using my house, without my consent, without discussion, without regard for what it meant to me. Each document, each number, Each dated transaction was a nail in the narrative they had carefully constructed to justify their favoritism. My extended family leaned in, incredulous. I walked them through the years of hidden loans, the informal transfers disguised as family help, the receipts showing my sister's reckless spending while my savings vanished. I paused at key points, letting the weight of each revelation sink in, watching expressions shift from confusion to disbelief. My sister's smug confidence crumbled as I traced the funds, proving that every indulgence she had enjoyed had come at my expense. Mom tried to interject, her voice rising, but I continued, unwavering, presenting the proof with clarity and composure that left no room for denial. By the time I finished, the room was heavy with tension, eyes darting between the documents and the faces of the guilty. The silence was deafening, broken only by murmurs of shock and disbelief. I could see it. The embarrassment, the discomfort, the realization that the scales of power had tipped. Karmic justice settled in like a tide. The family who had thought themselves untouchable had been exposed, their recklessness and favoritism laid bare for all to see. I felt a quiet satisfaction, a surge of vindication, knowing I had not only defended myself, but revealed the truth in a way that could not be erased. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I felt fully in control, standing tall while the consequences of their actions unfolded before everyone's eyes. The room was heavy with tension, the air thick with disbelief. My sister's face had drained of color, her usual arrogance replaced by shame she clearly didn't know how to handle. Mom shifted uncomfortably, opening her mouth, closing it, trying to frame excuses that sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I just wanted to help," Mom finally stammered, but the words fell flat, meaningless against the evidence spread before everyone. My sister muttered something about unforeseen circumstances, but her voice wavered, lacking conviction. I listened without interrupting, my hands folded calmly in front of me, feeling the quiet power of control settle in. Every apology, every defensive rationalization only reinforced the scale of their misjudgment. I remained composed, letting them speak while I allowed the weight of truth to resonate fully. Around the table, extended family exchanged looks of astonishment, murmurs of support mixing with shock. I felt a sense of vindication, not through anger, but through the clarity of having my reality recognized and validated. The emotional tide had shifted. I was no longer the powerless one, and for the first time I could breathe. The audience within this story, my relatives, my friends, witnessed the consequences unfold naturally, and that silent, controlled composure was more satisfying than any confrontation I could have staged. Every subtle glance, every uncomfortable pause, emphasized that justice had been served, and I held the quiet victory within me, fully aware that the reckoning had reached its peak. In the weeks after the dinner, I focused on finalizing the legal steps to reclaim what was mine. I worked with my lawyer to secure restitution, ensuring that the financial damage caused by Mom and my sister was formally acknowledged and corrected. Each signed document, each verified transaction, felt like a brick in the foundation of my regained independence. I moved into a new apartment, modest but entirely my own, arranging every corner to reflect the control and peace I had fought to achieve. I limited contact with my family, setting clear boundaries that no longer allowed them to exploit or manipulate me. While they navigated the humiliation of their actions being revealed to extended relatives, I carried myself with quiet dignity, my strength unshaken and unseen, far more powerful than the outrage they had tried to provoke. The contrast between their public embarrassment and my private empowerment was almost poetic. I didn't need to boast or seek revenge through spectacle. My calm authority and regained autonomy were far more satisfying. Each day, I felt lighter, knowing that I had reclaimed not just my finances, but my sense of self, proving that resilience and intelligence could outlast arrogance and favoritism. The power I now held was steady, deliberate, and undeniable, a testament to the patience and strategy that had carried me through. Sitting alone in my new apartment, I let myself finally breathe, reflecting on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the favoritism, the years of being overlooked. It all formed a pattern I could now recognize and understand. I realized that my mother and sister's actions spoke more about their flaws than my worth. Forgiveness didn't come easily, and perhaps it never would completely. but I understood that holding on to bitterness would only weigh me down. Instead, I chose to honor my own resilience, my capacity to navigate injustice, and my ability to reclaim control over my life. I also recognized the importance of boundaries, of protecting myself from toxic dynamics, and of trusting my instincts over familial expectations. The lessons were hard-earned but invaluable. My worth was never defined by their favoritism. My life wasn't theirs to dictate, and true power lay in quiet strength and strategic patience. Looking back, I could see how every hardship had prepared me for this moment of clarity and empowerment. The audience, witnessing my journey, would understand that even in the midst of betrayal, one can rise, rebuild, and reclaim dignity. It was a story of hurt transformed into insight, outrage turned into strategy, and loss converted into the confidence to move forward with life on my own terms. As I sit back and reflect on everything, one truth stands clearer than ever. Family isn't defined solely by blood, and loyalty doesn't mean sacrificing your dignity for someone else's recklessness. I've learned that self-respect is not negotiable, and protecting it sometimes means making hard choices, setting boundaries, and standing firm even when the world expects compliance. The betrayal I experienced was devastating, but it became a mirror, showing me the strength I hadn't realized I possessed. I see now that forgiveness isn't always about reconciliation. Sometimes it's about freeing yourself from resentment and claiming your own life without needing anyone's approval. Watching my mother and sister face the consequences of their choices was not about revenge. It was about truth, fairness, and balance finally restored. The lessons are sharp but simple. Honor your own worth. Recognize patterns that harm you, and never let others dictate your value. Even amidst heartbreak, even after the deepest betrayals, we can rise, reclaim our power, and live authentically. And as I move forward, I carry a quiet, unshakable confidence, the knowledge that respect, once lost, can always be rebuilt within yourself, and that sometimes the most profound loyalty is to the person staring back in the mirror.